to the Psychohealthology Summit 2018. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Dr. Eva Debko, and my guest for this session is lovely Misa Hopkins. Misa's healing journey began 20 years ago, and there is a story associated with that, so I will actually let Misa tell you the story. But she decided at some point to leave her successful business consulting practice and spend 10 years studying native and mystical traditions, and that included sound healing. And Misa actually used sound healing to heal herself, which she will tell you about as well. And now she coaches people around the world in using their spiritual gifts for their own self-healing. And in her best-selling books, courses, and TV and radio appearances, she reminds us it has always been the human spirit that beats the odds. So Misa, welcome to the Psychohealthology Summit. It's so great to have you with us. Really excited to talk to you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Eva. I'm so thrilled to be here. And the topic, of course, is so dear to my heart. It's just perfect to be able to share this time with you and your viewers to explore some alternative ways to address autoimmune diseases.
I'm so absolutely thrilled that I found you, and I know you share some wonderful content. But before we get to the content, of course, we want to hear the story, which I already said you're going to tell us. So just please go ahead and share.
I was really fortunate, Eva, when everything started for me in this healing journey. I was a very successful business consultant. I had an amazing mentor and teacher who had brought me into working with many professional practices. I'd started with my first Fortune 500 company. I was rolling, I was very, very happy. And I got a call from my brother one day saying that my mom was in the hospital and they didn't expect her to live through the week. Now, I had been away from my family for 2 years. Every time I was spending time with them, my emotions were getting triggered and I would make certain progress emotionally and then I'd backslide and I'd make progress and I'd backslide. So there was some trepidation when my brother called me and said, "Hey, mom is not expected to live. Do you want to come home?" And I said, "Well, of course I want to come home," to give her an opportunity to make closure. Whatever closure she needed to make to find peace in her life so that she could transition with grace. And we had what ended up being a beautiful conversation, very deep, very forgiving, probably the most memorable conversation with my mother in my life. So there I was sitting with my mom and she's starting to nod off under the morphine. And Eva, I did what I have done ever since I was a little girl. I just started humming. And this beautiful native chant came through. I'd never heard it before. And my mother was weeping under the morphine. And I understand that's very difficult to do, to cry under the influence of morphine, but she was. About an hour or two later, my entire family had come into my mother's room. And my mother, Eva, is sitting up in bed. Her cheeks are full of color. Her eyes are full of light. And when the doctor walked in the room, quite literally, his jaw dropped. And he said, "Jan, you are really looking good." And she said to him, "You have no idea how much good it has done me to see my kids." And he said, "Well, if you continue to look this good, tomorrow we'll send you home." And they did. So we got an extra 3 months with my mom that we weren't expecting to have. It was definitely her time to go. But she got to finish some things she needed to finish. And she left her daughter with, this makes me cry every time, the most precious gift she could have left me with, which was to know that inside of me, and as I've discovered inside of all of us, there are these incredible, beautiful, special gifts that give us the ability to heal and to thrive. And I can't imagine a more precious gift that a daughter could have received from her mother than the one my mother gave me.
And you know what? I did not mean to make you cry, but you are making me emotional telling the story. And we've only just connected, it's just so powerful. But you then went on to study different spiritual modalities, and I know that you use sound healing to also heal yourself. So tell us more about that.
Well, that moment rocked my whole life. And I decided shortly after that to leave my consulting business for what I thought was just going to be a short sabbatical, maybe a year. 10 years later, I was reforming my sacred work in the world. And during those 10 years, I was blessed to study with a medicine woman in the Cherokee tradition, which was my mother's bloodline. And then had another Cherokee mentor for several years. So I was really, really blessed. I can't emphasize that enough. That's not an experience everyone gets to have. So I studied in shamanic and healing traditions as my elder knew them. And by the way, I use shamanic because so many people kind of have a touchstone to what that is. In my tradition, you don't call yourself a shaman. You don't make a big deal out of a gift or an ability, or abilities plural. You just use them for the benefit of others. So that's what she taught me to do. And I was blessed to meet other people along the way, tremendous energetic healing gifts in various mystical traditions. And each one of them took me by the hand for a period of time and taught me. And that was a tremendous blessing in and of itself, just to be with these amazing individuals and to experience their energy and their hearts. And then I got to use those gifts, those talents, those skills that they then taught me when I found out I had MS. So it was quite the healing journey for me, and also put me on a path of deep emotional healing. The healing I was talking about, I was doing before my mother crossed over. It was that deep emotional work that I was doing. Just prior to meeting my doctor, I was standing in the bathroom. I had tears streaming down my face. I was crying because I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Nobody seemed to know what was wrong with me. Nobody had a solution for me. And I looked at that face in the mirror and said, I am there for you. No matter what, we are going to heal. You are going to heal. I'm going to be with you every step of the way, body. Hear me. This healing is going to happen. And tell me what is going on. Well, that night I had a dream, and I was told quite specifically that I had MS. And I said, oh, well, we aren't doing the wheelchair route. Not going there. Not going into the depths of what this condition what can happen, right, with this condition. I'm not going there. And we moved to a gentler climate for me, and I started doing sound healing 3 times a day, meditating 3 times a day. And a year later, the symptoms were completely gone. And along the way, discovered all kinds of things like the metaphysical meaning behind the illness, why MS, out of all the things I could have contracted, and was able to resolve some core issues that had been there since my childhood.
I never tired of hearing stories like that. That's fantastic, absolutely wonderful. So, of course, you did mention sound healing specifically as one of the modalities that you used through that period of time. So let's talk about what sound healing is. And maybe you can sort of make that connection for people who are watching. What can sound healing do for people with autoimmune conditions? And obviously, it's clearly MS is autoimmune, so we already have an example. But maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Sound healing, fortunately, more and more people are getting acquainted with. When I started using it, it was more far out than it is today. Now we have an understanding that we are vibrational beings, and that when you're accessing sounds for healing, you're accessing the vibrational frequencies that your body needs for its healing. It also accesses emotional vibrations that you need for your healing. So when you and I talked earlier, we chatted about working with vocables, which are combinations of vowels and consonants that aren't necessarily words. So for example, if I were singing da, 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 that might have a variety of different meanings for me. It might mean father. To me, it might, to me, sound more like die, or the word die, right? Or some sound that I've heard that's associated with a word that is uncomfortable for me or that is pleasing for me. And every single person is unique. So when you're working with the sounds, what I love the most, and that's true whether you're toning, which is what most people are familiar with, or you're working with animal sounds, or you're working with vocables, as I just suggested, whatever you're tapping into, and there are sounds beyond those three categories. Very often, those sounds are taking you into a pre-verbal state. It might be from when you were in the womb. That da, 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 da sound might give you a memory of being in the womb and music that your parents listened to. That conjures up an emotion for you. And that emotion then is translated as some kind of physical experience. So as we work with the sounds, what we're doing is giving our entire being an opportunity to lovingly be present to our experiences and lovingly allow it to shift within the vibration of sound itself. It isn't just me. I'm not the only person to have that experience. And I want to share one. Amelia was 70 years old when I was introduced to her. She had an aneurysm, and her daughter called me and asked me if I would do a reading for her mother to kind of get a sense of what direction they really needed to go, because their own intuition was telling them one thing and their doctor was suggesting another. And those are tricky readings to do. I never go against a doctor's advice, but I do try to go get more information so that they can feel more comfortable, right? Or they know what questions to ask their doctor. So I did. I meditated and I said, yes, he's right. The aneurysm is near critical, and it absolutely has to be attended to. And I said, but I'm really concerned about her heart. I'm not sure that your mother's heart can hold up to a surgery. Would you check that with another doctor? Well, unbeknownst to me, they'd already sent all the mother's tests to the Mayo Clinic. And that's exactly the response that they got back was, let's tend to the heart first. Let's strengthen the heart. And then we'll proceed with surgery for the aneurysm. So her daughter flew me out to her house, and this beautiful 70-some-year-old woman has never worked with energy medicine in her life. She has no idea what it is. And finally, I sat with her and I said, Amelia, you have a beautiful ability to visualize. So tell me what you see when I say a completely healed heart. And she described this beautiful vision. And I said, I'll tell you what, you hold that vision. And if it's okay with you, I'll sing to that vision. And together, let's see if we can strengthen your heart. Well, we spent a week together singing and visualizing. And I went home. A week later, I got a call from her daughter, and her daughter was ecstatic. And she said, you won't believe this. And I said, well, try me. I've seen a lot of pretty cool stuff in my life. I'm ready to be shocked. And she said, Mom has a whole new valve to her heart. Her mother had grown a new valve using her spiritual gift and allowing my spiritual gift of sound healing to support her. And she set the bar, as you can imagine, for what I aspire to with every single person I'm privileged to hold space with, that each individual find their own spiritual gift. And if it's healing, I've got all kinds of resources to help out. If it's another spiritual gift, I want to identify it. I want to help them identify it. And I want them to cruise on their spiritual gift just like I got to. And take ourselves to these places of creation that are inside of us. It's all there. So she was the one who opened up the doors of possibilities to me.
What an amazing case study. And as you said, what I love is that we all have our resources. It's just a question of having a guide, such as yourself in case of this particular person, because she had that gift all along. It's just that she didn't have a clue she had that gift. And that is true for so many people. Some people are aware of their gifts, but most people are not aware of their gifts. And that's there. It's there. It exists. It's just a question of tapping into it. So, yeah, I love that because that illustrates that really, really well. As you said, the woman had never even heard of energy medicine. So that's brilliant. So there's no way that she was able to utilize it on her own. But with your guidance, obviously the result was fantastic. Just to clarify this for people, because people may have heard of sound healing, and there's different types of sound healing, and some people use singing bowls and various other instruments, for instance, of course, because it is to do, in the end, it's all about the vibration. You use your voice, and you talked about a specific way in which to use it, which actually doesn't involve words, but there is also a linguistic side to it, isn't there?
It's a really, really good question. One of the things I teach in my audio course is that it's very important to become aware of the sounds you are making when you're speaking throughout the day. How are you speaking? How is that language coming through? Not just the words you're using, and those are important, but the energy behind the words makes a huge difference. I can listen to someone on the phone, and within just a few minutes, I know whether they're trapped in their mental body, whether they're living in their spiritual body, but not in their physical body, whether they're really earthed into their physical body, where the discomfort is, simply by the sound of the voice. And we can become aware of how we're speaking and how we're affecting people with those words. If your medicine, for example, runs through your voice, as it does for me, medicine meaning your healing modality, then you really have to be conscious about how we're speaking. Because, for example, if I say something in a very angry tone of voice, the way my elder explained it, she said that's 10 times what it would be for anyone else. And her medicine ran through her hands, and you could literally see her skin ripple as the energy was moving through her hands. And she said, you'll notice I don't wave my hands around, and I don't move my hands when I'm speaking in anger, because it will do more damage, she said. So wherever your medicine runs through you, you have extra responsibility to be thoughtful about how you're using that energy. So yes, our spoken voice is also part of our medicine.
In a way, you have this too, as I sort of, that's my sort of explanation for myself, is that in a way you've got this two-way highway going on. So in other words, the actual words can induce certain emotions, and of course can actually alter an energetic expression. Because obviously the words have meanings, and we attach meaning to words, so therefore we respond to them. So that's sort of goes one way, but also then the other way, it's actually the intensity and the energy with which we express ourselves. In this case, sometimes it doesn't actually matter what the words are, because it's the energy behind the words that's the charge. That's what carries that's where the force is. That's where the power is. Sort of my example would be, as I remember having, I had dogs when I was a kid, and I would sometimes give commands to my dog in a certain way. And in the way, with animals, it doesn't actually matter what words are coming out of your mouth. If they're picking up that you're frustrated with them, or that, you want them to do something that they don't want to do, that they will respond to that and not the actual words. So it's obviously they're responding to the energy behind it and the vibration, right?
That's so true. And with our words, we're also giving, and I'm so glad you spoke to that a little bit more, the words themselves can be triggers for injuries we've had, for example, as a child. Right? So, for example, we might be adults and someone might tease us and say, oh, grow up, but they're just teasing, right? But if you heard that as a message as a child, and with it came all of that energy we're talking about, right? It was grow up. It hurts. It digs in. And even when someone says that in a playful way, those words are now triggers for you. And it's possible to be triggered throughout the day and so hardened to your own triggers that you're not noticing them. but emotionally you feel like you're getting hit multiple times a day. So it behooves us to become more aware of those interactions, observers of those interactions, so that we can see what's happening for us internally with the words that we're experiencing from others and that we're saying to ourselves, which can often be the most damaging, the silent words inside of our head, the criticisms, the judgments that we're making about ourselves. And then also the sounds, the energy behind it, and notice it and pay attention to it so that we can actually start a deeper healing process.
Yeah, and in a way that goes back to people's own self-awareness, because oftentimes, just like what you were just saying there, is that people can be triggered and not actually even recognize that they are being triggered, in which case they spend most of their day in this aggravated state, or they're sad, or they're angry or anxious, and they're not really sure where on earth that's coming from, because they woke up and the day looked like, it looked like it was going to be a good day. And then all of a sudden, they interacted with somebody and bang, they brought up these negative emotions. So this is the importance of having that self-awareness and understanding what actually, triggers us. And of course, there's ways of dealing. There are loads of ways of dealing with it, clearly. But it needs to start with, rather than just sort of go along with it, we need to step back and ask those questions. Why am I suddenly, I was feeling fine, and then suddenly I'm feeling anxious or angry or whatever. And it may well be in the sounds and in the words and in the emotional charge that they carry.
I'm smiling because you're explaining it so perfectly. That's exactly what we discover. And one person's trigger is not another person's trigger. So when we're working with sound, we go into different kinds of sounds, different exercises, so that you can experience for yourself safely where some of those triggers might be. And you're also going to anchor and root into some of your own medicine sounds, the sounds that most quickly revive you, the sounds that give you comfort. Inside of every person, there are a myriad of medicine songs. There's songs for power, songs for prosperity, songs for healing, songs for comfort, which I just mentioned, and a whole array of different sound bites, you might say, that work best for you. And what I found intriguing about medicine songs when I first started working with them is that I could only remember them when I needed them. So for example, when I was going through a very painful separation, I had a comfort song that would come to me. And the minute I started singing it, I felt, okay, I can deal with this. It's all right. And then I would be out for a walk feeling great and say, gosh, I wonder what that comfort song is. How does that go? No memory. I could not remember that song. Those medicine songs are unique. And when we hear them, they evoke those emotions that allow us to transition from the pain that we're experiencing into a greater state of comfort and peace. And ultimately, then there are sounds that take us into even higher states of bliss and joy. And we learn very quickly that it's a wave, right? We have a myriad of feelings throughout the day. And we have these beautiful little tools through our medicine songs that help us find our equilibrium. And that makes life a whole lot more enjoyable. And when those negative voices start quieting down, then life gets easier. And it does get more enjoyable. So I've delighted over the years in helping a lot of people access medicine songs that they've been really surprised to find how quickly they work for themselves. I used to have backache all the time and it's gone, or I used to have migraines, or whatever it is that you do have this influence and it's built into you, right? It's one of the reasons I love to work with vocal sound. You'll always have it. When there's an emergency, it's right here. Activated. When you can't sing out loud, you can sing quietly in your mind. You can feel the comfort of that song whenever you need it. So yeah, these sounds that we have access to and our capacity to observe our world around us and and note what vibrational change is happening, right, through our interactions, gives us the opportunity to recognize what we need in any given moment for our own equilibrium.
Some people they do it instinctively, don't they? You know, if they feel uncomfortable, they start whistling or humming or doing something like that. You know, I know plenty of people who do that. And you can straight away, whether they may be feeling anxious or maybe feeling angry, or, you know, if you recognize those patterns, because they break into a song or they start whistling or something like that, we sort of know our own healing powers, and we can use them instinctively also. But of course, always helps to be guided, because then we can be more targeted with our approach. Which is always a sort of, it's shortcutting a lot of the things that we otherwise would have to go through. So you sort of started talking a little bit about it, but I'm just curious to explore with you your process, your structure when you work with sound. And all I'm going to say actually before you answer this question is that you kindly offered to do a healing session. So we have this healing session every day of the summit. We've got a focus session that is oriented towards healing. And one of the sessions is going to be Misa doing some sound healing. So there's going to be an opportunity to actually experience this practically. But just talk us through the process, because I know there's obviously some structure to what you do.
Well, one of the things I teach people right away, and I think it's the most important, is that everybody has healing sounds within them. Everyone. And you don't have to be a singer to access them. You don't have to carry a tune to access them. If you can breathe and you can hum, or you can hear sounds in your head, you can do sound healing. So that's the really good news, right? In fact, I tell my students my own operatic training got in my way. I had to let it go in order to access the breadth of sounds that were really, truly there, because your voice is an amazing instrument that goes beyond what we know to be sound, right? An acceptable sound or beautiful sound. So when I work with people, and I don't work individually anymore, I've done so many classes over the years, and I taught healers for years how to access healing sounds to work with their clients. Now I have a recorded audio that takes them through all of the steps that I took my students through for years. And I can give an instruction, and then you're going to go into your own experience anyway and have your own miraculous insights occur. And that's what I want. I want you to discover how your medicine works inside you. What are those sounds that bring you comfort? What are the sounds that seems to be shifting your mental fog for you to find them? And in that process, and this is, I think, probably just as significant, is discovering when not to use sounds. There are conditions for which it is far better for you to be in the silence and know how to hold yourself in compassion in the silence than it is to make sounds. For example, with migraine headaches, occasionally people can handle a very low frequency vibration, but most people prefer actually to be in the silence. And you don't have to just pull down the shade and turn out the light and try to sleep. There's a way to be in that silence and sacred feminine energy, as contrasted to sound, which is expression, and as I know it is sacred masculine energy, that is balancing out your system. And it's giving you an opportunity to fully and completely rest. So we spend a lot of time being in the contrasts of these two energies, and each person discovering for themselves what anchors them into their unique state of equilibrium.
Great, nicely explained. And yes, that was something that I was going to ask you about, this sort of yin and yang and the sound versus silence, and that sometimes you need to access the other side. And so great. Thank you for bringing that in. And obviously you said that you're not actually doing individual work as such, but there's audio and there's obviously other ways. So just tell us about the sort of the options that you offer other than the audio that you already mentioned.
Oh, sure. There is the audio class. I also have dozens of pre-recorded sound healing sessions, and some of them are for specific autoimmune diseases. Obviously, I made one for MS. There are a series of CDs or MP3s, for MS and fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis and a variety of different conditions that my people have asked me for, actually, that assist them with their healing. I also do individualized recordings for people. So they might have a list of things, I've got this and this and this and this going on in my body. And there's a medicine song for every single one, usually a medicine song for every single one of those concerns. And so I'll do a personalized MP3 for them. And some individuals are not looking for healing, or they're at a place where they've done enough healing or their own healing gifts are activated enough. They're fine. They're looking for sounds that awaken them and take them into new states of consciousness. One of the great gifts of sound healing is that it takes us into a trance-like state. The deeper we go into those trance-like states, the less resistance there is, the less the mind is the ego is trying to get control, the more healing actually occurs when you're talking about energetic healing. So many individuals like to find one of the recordings that I have that assists them in going into the deep trance states. Or they ask me to create something special for them so they can go way deep in and experience the release that they're looking for. And then for those that I want to do it myself, and they feel really called to the sounds, then they can grab the audio course and dive in. And I get all kinds of wonderful letters about what they're discovering in their dive and what opens for them. So those are the primary ways I work with sound. On the silent end of things, I teach people how to access an ancient native meditation in the sacred feminine that was given to me. I call it the holding, and it takes you into the womb of creation so that you can literally, in that silence and stillness and cool darkness, the yin energy, rebirth yourself. And it's in that very, very silent, still place that many of my students have learned how to go into deep, deep states of release. And with that comes a whole new rebirth into the light and the sound of who you are. With MS, I found a very buried emotional trigger that shocked the heck out of me. So that time in meditation and silence is just as valuable, it was to my healing, as the sounds were.
That is phenomenal, and thank you for sharing that. And just good to know that you actually have a library of recordings for specific autoimmune conditions. I'm sure that would be of huge interest to people who are listening. But also the fact that you mentioned that there was something that came up for you in the process that actually shocked you. So it's not necessarily something that you were looking for, not something that you necessarily previously identified. It's something that just came up. Now, the reason why I picked up on this is because when I talk about addressing emotional toxicity in order to heal, oftentimes people will say, but I don't know whether I've got this problem, Well, let me put it this way. If you have an autoimmune condition and you have presenting symptoms, there's going to be an emotional aspect to it. And that is that. I haven't yet met anybody with autoimmune condition who wouldn't have something. But just because you are not able to identify it currently doesn't mean it's not there. And sometimes through those processes that, Misa is describing and other speakers are describing, you will stumble across something that exactly may completely shock you, something that you did not expect. So this is a very important thing to sort of shine some light on, because sometimes it's not something we are aware of, but it's sitting deep in our subconscious. It's completely messing with our health. It's producing symptoms, and it's through exploring these modalities and the self-discovery journey and various things that we do when we do self-development, that those things eventually come up to the surface and they get released. So thank you for mentioning that, because I think that's a very interesting thing, that even with you, with all this knowledge and with all the skills that you had, it wasn't something you expected. It just came up when you were ready. And that's obviously another element is the aspect of readiness.
Either the vibrations are going directly into the body and it's providing me with physical relief and physical stability, or it is going into the emotional root that set it all into motion. It's the reason it's presenting in this form in my body at this time, right? This emotional root, and it releases the emotional root, or it sets up a vibratory frequency inside me that helps me attract exactly what I need to heal. It enhances other gifts that I may have. And it sets up this field of attraction. So I've seen individuals experience the benefits of the sound healing in different ways, depending upon what was right and appropriate for them. And discovering this key piece of being able to release the emotional trauma and the emotional belief that was associated with it was a surprise to me. I didn't know sounds could do that. Initially, that was part of what I discovered in the MS was the attachment that I had to a belief and all the trauma, emotional trauma that went with it. And it all released within a matter of really weeks once it was able to come to the surface safely, right? That's what we're creating is a safe space to love yourself in your entirety. That's what it's all about. That's what the healing journey is. Can I love myself in my entirety with what, quote, I deem to be working, what I deem to be unlovable, what I deem to be just right about me? Can I love myself in my entirety? And that is the opportunity that is before us. Whatever we experience that set the trauma into motion, whether we see it as just being physical trauma or emotional trauma or spiritual trauma, I've seen that as well, where there's an entity attachment or some weird thing going on from a past life or all kinds of ways, or a belief system, right? I believe it works this way. There really is a connection between mind, body, spirit, and emotions. They're all working together. When I had the MS and I discovered there was an emotional root to that and began to explore the metaphysical meaning of it, then I learned that the sounds could actually support me in that journey of evolution and of freedom from the illness.
Absolutely, completely resonating with what you're saying here, because obviously I had my own health challenges, and there was always a meaning behind it, that's for sure. And so, yeah, I encourage people to keep their minds open to that, because once that's released, well, that's it. You will be getting better. You on your way out of it, and to actually optimal health, hopefully, which is what we all want. So, thank you so much for this session. You've contributed so beautifully, and everything that you've shared makes obviously perfect sense to me, and I hope it makes perfect sense to everybody else, and it's very powerful. So I wanted to ask you if there's anything else you want to share, because we obviously talked about the resources that you've got, and of course I'm pointing towards your website, but just before we end, is there any sort of final words, anything else that you want to share with the viewers?
I think you said it in the bio. I really believe that it's the human spirit that beats the odds. That's really fundamentally what we get to discover. And what I know about the human spirit is that the human spirit is fed by our capacity to love. And that is limitless. So a healing journey is an opportunity to love like you have never loved yourself before. So with that in mind, the gift that my husband and I, the husband, as you mentioned, who is my great supporter, as he refers to himself, I'm just the husband, created a sound medicine CD. And that is my precious, I hope, gift to everyone, is a belief in your capacity to heal.
You've been absolutely wonderful. I enjoyed so much connecting with you, talking to you, listening to what you had to share. And yes, hopefully we will do it again sometime soon.
Oh, Eva, thank you for your good work in the world. There are so many lucky people getting this great information and insights because of your story and your commitment and your passion. And we're just blessed. We're blessed to have you in the world, dear.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you very much for watching.